Momita had a long day of work ahead of her. For the next 36 hours, her workplace would essentially be her home. She would be eating there, sleeping there, and most importantly, she would be looking after her patients there. Every time that was spent at her workplace meant that she gets to inch closer to becoming the exceptional doctor that she knows she would be, and especially in a field that she always wanted to specialize in. So she eats breakfast with her family, tells them about the day ahead of her, and they hug her goodbye. But maybe they would have hugged her a little bit more tighter, a little bit more longer if they knew that this would be the last time they would be seeing their precious daughter alive. This is the case of Moumita Debnath, a Kolkata based doctor who got her life brutally stripped away from her at a place where people are given second chances, at a place where people are given new lives. This is a place that took away her life. And this case has erupted essentially everybody with anger, and everybody is furious at the nature of this case and how heinous one human being could be against another human being. And this case has also brought to table one of the very important discussions regarding women's safety at their workplace. You're listening to Kikironicals crime scenes, and let's get into it. Now, before we get into the story, I do have a bunch of trigger warnings. There will be mention of suicide, rape, and murder. So if that is too much for you, you can consider skipping this story. And I also want to mention this case is all ongoing, so there isn't any verdict or conviction as of yet. There are some suspects, but again, since it's not proven by the court of law, it's nothing is 100%, and most of that is opinion based, or it's just what we are hearing from social media and other platforms. Momita was born in April 10, 1993, in a small town in Kolkata. Kolkata is the capital of West Bengal. This is one of the provinces in India. Her father was a tailor, and there isn't much said about her mother, but she was most likely a homemaker. Ever since she was a kid, she had this constant strive to help other people, and at the same time, she was super interested in subjects like biology and science. And this one time, she goes up to her father and tells him, Papa, isn't it a good thing to help other people and become a doctor? And her father looked at her and said, okay, if that's what you want to be, that's what you will be. And with that, the journey for both of the father and the daughter began. On the side, Mamita would work hard and study hard to get to where she want to be. And on the other side, her father, who was a small town tailor, he started taking more jobs, he started working more hours to help build up the resources that would help his daughter realize her dreams. Now, in India, to become a doctor, much like in every part of the world, is not an easy feat. You have to complete series of exam, and one of the major exams that you have to complete to secure a position at a medical college, it's called NEET exam. NEET is essentially National Eligibility Come Entrance Exam, and this is a super hard exam. Just to give you a scale of how hard this is, every year, around 1.2 million Indian students appear for this exam and compete for medical seats, and there are only around 100,000 medical seats. So that means that out of all of these people that appear in this exam, only the top 9% will be able to make it in one of those seats. So you have to essentially lie in a percentile that is above 91%. So that's a huge deal. And Mamita appeared for this exam and aced it completely, and she secured a seat in one of the medical colleges. This college was College of Medicine and JNM Hospital. It was in Kalyani of West Bengal, so she had to move from Kolkata to Kalyani to pursue her MBBS degree. After a grueling 6.5 years, she earned her medical degree and she went back to her hometown in Calcutta. And here she decided to pursue specialization. So after MBBS, you can either just head straight to work, or you can like specialize too on the side. And Mamita decided she wanted to specialize. She chose the Department of Chest Medicine. This was something she was always interested in, and she managed to secure a position at RJ Kaur Medical College. This college was also in Kolkata, so it was great. She didn't have to move out of her hometown, and she gets to stay with her family. And all of this time, Momita's parents really pulled through. They helped support her dreams, they helped her with finances. And with this specialization, it meant that Momita was finally taking reins. She was finally becoming independent enough to give back to her parents. So it was a milestone after another. It was a great thing for both her parents and her, and she was beyond excited. Her dreams were finally coming true, and after the first year of postgraduate specialization, her parents gifted her a brand new car. And this was a great thing for all of them. She shared that on social media, and it looked like everything was looking up to her, everything was in place, and she was in a great position at her life. She just completed her MBBS and she is going to specialize and become a chest medicine specialist. So, this is everything that she wanted. But just 6 months after this, another milestone that she and her parents hit, her life was brutally taken away from her. On August 8, 2024, Momita takes blessings from her parents. She's probably not going to see them for the next 2 days, but this is not out of the norm for them. Momita sometimes have very elongated shifts, so this is one of those days. And so they give her the blessings, and Momita heads to her workplace. She works tirelessly during the day, and as the night hits, she decides to take a nap and eat her dinner. So she makes her way to seminar hall, which is basically an area where doctors and especially the interns or training doctors would like to just like relax and chat. So Momita makes her way to the hall. There it is alleged that she also meets some other intern doctors and she chats with them. She eats her breakfast and then she naps. A couple of minutes pass by, and there are other people that make their way to the seminar hall, and the next hours are elusive. We don't know what exactly happened, but we do know that the next morning, on August 9, 2024, at around 11 o'clock, Momita's parents were called. Somebody on the other line was talking from the hospital, and the only thing that they told the parents was that Momita was sick and they were asked to make their way to the hospital. So that's what they do. As her parents make their way to the hospital, they see this parade of police officers. Everything seems super confusing at this point, and as they go inside the hospital, one of the police officers take them aside and tell them that their daughter has committed suicide. Their confusion now turned into shock, and they try to inquire further about how this happened and why this happened. They're not told much about it, but after some agonizing hours, they are allowed to see their daughter, but only at one condition, that there have to be other doctors present on the scene. So her parents make their way to seminar hall, and her father looks at this body that looks so much like his daughter, but she's not smiling like she always used to. She just looks shattered. And there are a couple of things that he also notices. The number one thing is that Momita's body was half naked. She was covered with a shroud, a blue shroud, and she also had a couple of bruises on her body, and her eyes were bleeding. So, at a first glance, not only is he shocked, but he also thinks that this is not suicide by any means. And he's constantly being reassured by people on site that it is suicide. Now, even though almost everybody at the site was kind of insisting that Momita had committed suicide, Momita's body was sent for autopsy, and the first inquest report that included the autopsy finding, it was released to public. And this release, I think it was released or either leaked, but regardless of whatever it was, this autopsy finding erupted a storm in India, erupted a massive storm that only grew larger in the days to come. Now, the findings of this report are pretty gruesome, so I would add a little bit of trigger warning here. You can skip a little bit more if you don't want to hear this, but it is important to the case. The first major finding that just got everybody thinking what really happened is that on Momita's body and inside Momita's body, they found 150 milligram of semen. Now, this is very crucial piece of evidence, especially not just in terms of DNA, but also in the terms of quantity. Just to give you guys an example, an average human being produces around 1.5 to 5 milligram of semen. So to have 150 milligram of semen, or to have people that can produce this kind of semen, that means that you need to have like around 30 people at the very least. And it technically said that there were more people involved in this crime, and instead of rape, this was most likely a gang rape. Some of the other findings of this report was that Momita's hyoid bone, which is basically her neck bone, it was completely broken, and her legs were twisted to a very unnatural angle, and there was a lot of muscle tear there. And Momita's eyes were completely damaged. Both of her eyes were damaged, and it looked like she was probably bashed with something kind of like a glass panel, because she had literal shards of glass in her eyes. So it pointed out to post gang rape and torture. The autopsy also found that Momita's pelvic bone was very severely broken. The pelvic bone being severely broken, to me, it shows the level of gruesomeness of this crime, the heinousness that these human beings showed to Momita, because pelvic bone is one of the biggest bones in human body and it's not easy to break. We usually hear about bones like ribs breaking. Rib is comparatively smaller bone and pelvic bone is huge. So just by the fact that this bone was severely fractured shows the insanity that happened to this poor woman. Now, with these findings and with the nature of the extent of damage that happened to this body, not just the medical community in India, but the rest of the India erupted in flames. They were not having this. This was one of the most gruesome crimes that they've seen in centuries, and they wanted justice and they wanted justice now. And this public support and public appeal was really good because it meant that people can't really cover up this case, because it looked like in this case there were some entities, there were some people that wanted to cover it up. For example, the hospital RJ Medical College suddenly decided that this was the best time to have renovations, and they started having renovations just 20 meters away from crime scene, which is kind of insane to me because you are actively contaminating the crime scene. Fortunately, this was soon shut down by the students of that hospital as they started barricading the crime scene and they wanted to preserve it as much as they could. So that was super great. And at the same time, Momita's parents also noticed that there was this urgent rush for them to cremate Momita's body, even though there were 2 to 3 more bodies that were waiting cremation. And they reported that this was due to the local police chief. Despite all of these things that were going on, police officers were able to make an arrest. They arrested a man named Sanjay Rao. He was basically a civil servant at this hospital. Civil servant is basically someone from an administrative role, so he wasn't necessarily a doctor. And this arrest wasn't really handled well by the public because if you remember, the autopsy report showed that there was 150 milligram of semen found on Momita's body. That meant that there were at least more than one people at the crime scene. And this arrest of a suspect, which looked like the only suspect that the police officers had at this point, didn't really seem to be that credible. But the police officers had reported that Sanjay Rao did in fact confess to them that he did what he did to Mamita. And one of the evidences that tied him to the crime was essentially that he was found around the area around the time that this would have happened. And they found some pornographic material on his phone, which again doesn't seem to be that reliable piece of evidence. It seems circumstantial to me. And also, I have to think that they have like 150 milligram of semen just sitting in evidence. Why don't you just do a DNA test? It doesn't look like the police officers did DNA test. I could be wrong. I couldn't find any details on that, but that was one of the evidences that kind of tied him to the scene. On the other hand, Sanjay Rao himself had reportedly said to the court that he hadn't committed these crimes and he was being framed. So people weren't really buying that, and people were essentially calling him a scapegoat for the hospital. Seeing all of this, the High Court of India decided that they can no longer trust the local authorities, the local law enforcement authority, and they have to hand over this case to CBI, which is Central Bureau of Investigation, kind of like an FBI of India. So the case doesn't just stick to the local law enforcement body that might have like some kind of stakes in this case, and they might be potentially allegedly paid off. So CBI got this case and they started investigating. With this investigation, they built up their list of suspects, and now their list of suspects included 6 people instead of one. This list included the principal of the hospital, Sandeep Ghosh, 4 male doctors that were on the duty at the night of August 9, and one civil volunteer. Now, this list of suspects resonated more with the people because, again, this crime seemed to be done by more than one people. So having this list of suspects just made sense. And also because Sandeep Ghosh, the principal that was cited in this suspect list, he seemed to be a little shady to say the least. For starters, Sandeep Ghosh was asked to resign from this hospital after this case happened, but he was soon reinstated into another prestigious hospital. But at the same time, people started digging into his past, and it looked like he had been reinstated to this college, RJ Carr Medical College, 2 times prior to this case. He was essentially kicked off because of some allegations of corruption or something similar. There wasn't much detail into why he was kicked off and then reinstated, but he was reinstated at least 2 times before this happened. And people also started digging into his personal life, and it looked like he was just in general not the best person. It was reported that he had kicked his wife in belly after she had given birth via C-section, and that led to her stitches being open and the neighbors being called for domestic violence. So yeah, he would abuse his wife and his kids allegedly. So yeah, he was just not the best person, putting it too lightly. But this is not even the start of the conspiracy theories that are emerging from this case. In some social media posts and some websites, it's been reported that this hospital's principal and some of the doctors were involved in this organ trafficking ring or a racket, and Momita found out about that, and that's one of the reasons why this happened to her, and that this was all premeditated. So that's where we are at Momita's case. This is still an ongoing case, and investigation is being done into the principal and other suspects, and also Sandeep Ghosh, to see who or how many people really did this. The massive silver lining that really came from this case, if there could be any, is that people, not just in India, in the rest of the world, are really talking about how women should be protected in the workplace, and the ways that an average human being can just be decent enough to not do these heinous crimes. And at the end of the day, what we really can only hope for is that all of the criminals that took part in this crime are brought to justice, and Momita's parents are finally given some sort of closure. And while there are so many people that are actively protesting against the authorities that don't really seem to be doing what they should be doing, and actively protesting for this case to be brought to justice, there are some people, which I like to believe is a minority of internet, that is taking some kind of odd evil pleasure in this case. It was reported by Google that there was around 110% increase in people searching for Moumita Debnath's rape video, and her name was also reportedly showing on porn sites quite a lot, which is just so sad. But good news is most of the people are sane, and most of the people really are fighting for this case, and fighting for this case to never happen again, and for nobody in future to ever go through what Momita went through. As I was researching this case, I also looked up what Momita's name means. Momita is basically a Bengali word. It is derived from two words, Mo and Mita. Mo basically means sweet or sweet as honey, and Mita means friend. So Momita is basically, her name translates to sweet friend, or a friend as sweet as honey, and that was what she was. She was a sweet friend to her parents, sweet friends to her friends, and just a sweet person all around. And she just sounded like the sweetest person you could ever meet, just like her name.